I'd like to call our budget hearing to order and ask if you would join me in the pledge to our flag. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'm going to turn the meeting over to our budget officer and clerk of the board in just a minute. Before I do, I want to make sure that everyone does have a copy of the tentative budget if they wish. I believe there are some extra copies out in the hallway, so be sure to grab one of those. And for those that are watching from home, of which we are now capable of doing this, those are available online on our website as well. And before I turn it over, I just had a couple of comments. I don't have anything prepared, but I do want to talk just a couple of minutes about our budget, our finances, and our process that we go through here. For a number of years, and this is going back to when I was first on the board, I felt we were a little bit out of sync with not having a standalone budget committee and a better handle on the process of monitoring our existing budget and looking ahead and planning financially for years to come. And obviously it was apparent when we were running in the hole. When I first came on the board, we were somewhere around $5 million in the hole and running in the red at the end of the year. And I felt that it was an embarrassment to have over a $100 million budget and not be able to make ends meet and then try to apologize to the taxpayers of why we don't have a better financial position for Allegheny County. So we approached that with a dedicated finance or budget committee and started to straighten things out. For the last several years, I have said that Allegheny County is in the best financial position that it's ever been in its history. And I would repeat that tonight, that Allegheny County is in the best financial position in the county's history. Now, what does that mean for the taxpayers? It means that we have had Moody's and Standard & Poor's take a look at our finances, and outside folks take a look at our finances and agree that we're in good financial position. They've bettered our bond rating, which when we go to out to borrow money, that means better interest rates. We have done that. We've rolled over a couple of our debts and saved millions of dollars for the taxpayers of Allegheny County by doing that. If we weren't in the position that we are in or have been in, we wouldn't be able to say that or to reap the harvest of that, if you will. The other thing I think that has helped turn that around by having a budget committee, a finance committee, is a more year-round process of not only monitoring where we are at the moment with current budget, which we do on a regular basis, but a longer period of time leading into constructing and putting a budget together for the next year. Timetable goes out and procedures go out, and we start this early in the year. So we have a year-round process that the legislators are involved in. Obviously, the department heads are, and the finance people within those departments are, to keep a handle on this. One thing that I have felt strongly about, and wear as a feather in my cap is when we went to a one-page report for the department heads, which they would bring in and still report that they're on track with their expenses. Yes, no, if not, why not? And also with revenues. So it asks the department heads and kind of holds their feet to the fire as to where we are as we go through the current budget year. And I think that has certainly helped this board to have a handle on and understand the finances better. When we get one piece of paper that says that versus a stack of papers that historically we had some department heads coming in at a committee meeting with, and you try to paw through that and keep up with that makes it very difficult. So one page that says, yes, I'm on track with expenses, yes, I'm on track with revenues certainly help. We have a healthy fund balance at this time, and this has allowed us to be debt-free from things that we used to borrow money for. Our bridge program, our vehicles, we were at one time bonding and borrowing money just to keep the lights on, make ends meet payroll. That wasn't a good position to be in. We didn't have the cash flow that would allow us to keep up with those expenses, and we had to borrow money to do that. We're debt-free at the moment, other than a couple of big projects that we still have bonds out for, that being the court project and the public safety facility. So I think that as we go forward and look at and plan ahead, these are all pieces that help this board and the next board plan and be able to invest and help the taxpayers in Allegheny County. We have invested in infrastructure, in economic development, and we want to see that continue. We think that that's a healthy position for the county to take and to be in as we go forward. And as we invest monies there, those come back in return, a long time return, in the way of private investments into the county. So at this time, I want to thank our department heads. Obviously, they've been intimately involved with working through this budget, starting in June or so. And certainly our budget officer / county administrator, Carissa Knapp, along with the deputy budget officer and / county treasurer Terry Ross. They've done a tremendous job in putting this together and working with us, keeping the board involved. And if you look at some of the other counties, when a budget is presented, it's lots of times last minute and the board doesn't have a good handle on it, and that's when 11th hour decisions are made that aren't always the best. So for the last number of years, having it be more of a year-round process has been a great help and has led to financial strength in Allegheny County. The chair of our budget committee, Brooke Harris, I want to thank you and leading us through that. I printed off one committee meeting, I think it's 19 pages long, that a review of this budget. I didn't need to bring in these books today, but purposely did that when we start out with the workbooks, worksheets, go through that and boil it down so that we have a budget like this in front of us to work from. There's a lot of information that is compiled and that we work through. After tonight, and tonight is the opportunity for folks to come forward and speak to this board. That's the purpose of this public hearing. But we will have a swipe at the budget, if you will, again, to move from the tentative budget, which we're talking about tonight, to a final budget that needs to be adopted by this board. And we're hoping to have that put together, and adjustments that will need to be made need to be done by resolution that gets us from the tentative to the final budget that we'll be voting on. So the 2022 budget will be, without changes to the tentative, will be the 12th year that there has been a reduction in the average property tax rate in Allegheny County. And that has been a movement down. I didn't look to see exactly what the rate equates to compared to historically, but off the top of my head, my guess would be that this rate takes us back 10 years or more to where we were. So I think that certainly is good news for the taxpayers. And I guess my message would be that your board is engaged and certainly has a handle on our finances here in Allegheny County. And again, we are in good financial position, and we want to retain that. So I believe that at this time I'll turn it over to our budget officer, and we will proceed with the public hearing.
Thank you, Chairman Crandall. Good evening and welcome to tonight's public hearing on the proposed tentative operating budget for 2022. The purpose of this hearing is to afford the public with an opportunity to become familiar with our proposed spending plan on behalf of the citizens of Allegheny County. Further, the public will be afforded the opportunity to ask questions about the contents of the spending plan, as well as provide comment for the members of the Board of Legislators. The operating budget was compiled with input from the county department heads, budget officer, and the Legislative Budget Committee. Our plan was compiled, presented, reviewed, and approved by the full Board of Legislators. That was sent to them on October 25th, 2021. It was released for public review on October 25th, 2021 as well. The format we will follow tonight in reviewing the tentative budget is identical to the format we have used for several years. If you do not have a copy of the tentative budget and would like one, they are available on a table just outside the back of the room. The appropriations portion of the budget, which is the only portion we review during the public hearing, is comprised of 18 major categories, beginning with general government support and ending with a debt service fund. The clerk of the board will read the total appropriated amount for each major category. We will then pause and ask if anyone has a question or comment with regard to that specific category or any departmental cost center contained in that category. Once questions have been addressed, or if there are no questions or comments, we will proceed until we have worked through the entire budget. On a final note, I would like to remind those in attendance that the sole purpose of this hearing is to address the tentative budget. The hearing is not intended as a forum to debate the value or necessity of particular county agencies or programs. Anyone who has a desire to express his or her opinion with regard to individual programs or services should do so with your elected legislative representatives at another time. If, during this public hearing, you wish to address the Board of Legislators, please state your name and identify the town in which you live. Thank you. Madam Clerk, I believe you are next in line.
The 2022 tentative budget, which is the subject of tonight's public hearing, is a joint effort of the county budget staff, the Budget Committee of the Board of Legislators, and our department heads. The tentative budget, when taking into account All 9 major appropriation funds totals $126,596,174. Offsetting these appropriations are anticipated revenues of $91,752,396, appropriated reserves of $100,000, and appropriated fund balance of $4,790,000, leaving a balance of $29,953,778 to be raised in county property tax to balance the budget. The property tax levy necessary to balance the 2022 tentative budget represents an increase of $299,181, or 1.01%, from the property tax levy contained in the final 2021 county budget. The average county property tax rate for 2022 decreased by 0.0374 cents per $1,000 of assessed value as compared to the 2021 average county tax rate. The 2021 rate was $14.6266 per $1,000 of assessed value, and the 2022 rate is $14.5892 per $1,000. It is expected that a final county budget will be adopted by the Board of Legislators at its regularly scheduled meeting on Monday, November 22nd at 2 p.m. We will be looking at this budget book tonight, and we're going to be starting on page 9. Total general government support, $11,886,670. Are there any questions regarding total general government support category? On page 10, total education. Yes, Mr. Jones.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I don't know how this fits into your thing. I remember we did this once.
Can we have your name and where you reside, just for the record? Thank you.
Yes, my name is Casey Jones, and I'm here tonight in 2 capacities. One is a private citizen of Belmont, and the second is an executive director of the Allegheny Hope Incorporated and also editor of community news dissemination on Facebook. These roles overlap, but where they don't, I'll try to be clear as the viewpoint from which I'm speaking. I don't know how this fits into your particular thing, but I don't know how you analyze a budget or speak to a budget based upon categories when the overall budget is the biggest piece, and how it goes together is important in regard to what's happening. But Allegheny Hope is a Christian nonprofit organization focused on building healthy communities through healthy families, and this includes the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health of individuals and families. This is important in that even the federal government, FEMA, Health and Human Services, Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services, all recognize the need for a balance in life, what I call a 3-legged stool. When one leg is shorter or out of balance, it affects the other 3 legs. To begin with, I'd like to look at some housekeeping tasks. First, I'd submit, you've asked for names and addresses, or names and locations of people. And I would submit that if there's anyone here tonight that doesn't want to provide that information, that's contrary to the open meetings law requirement, as noted in multiple opinions from the State Committee on Open Government. There's a reason for that, although I've always identified myself, and many times by non-identity, it goes against the credibility sometimes of the testimony. But there are individuals who may not want to be recognized because of issues such as potential harassment, domestic violence, or other situations. And so therefore I would suggest that that requirement needs to be provided with a caution or with a nuance, and that the Committee on Open Government makes that clear in several opinions. Second, I'd like to request that at the conclusion of this public hearing tonight, that it be recessed for at least 10 days or longer, based on the county not having been responsive to my Freedom of Information request for information related to the budget preparation process. Therefore, until such information and any related data is received, and I did receive something at 4:30 this afternoon, which is a little late, to analyze, it's impossible to adequately prepare oneself to fully address the matter of this tentative budget. This information was requested from the county on Thursday, October 18th, 3 days after the board received the budget and set its public hearing. I received a return email from the county administrator on the same day saying that she wished to consult with the deputy budget officer for the purpose of having a conversation with me the beginning of last week. My offer for initial discussion, without delaying receipt to me of the information sought, was to potentially reduce the amount of effort the county might need to take to comply with this request. No further communication was received, and I filed an appeal pursuant to law last Friday, November 5th. I received a partial reply, as I said, at 4:30 this afternoon, with several dozen pages of documents which are impossible to go through, and others that I understand were not forwarded and are being put on a flash drive. Therefore, I'm requesting at least 10 days after receipt of the information requested, which is important in validating what I'm going to discuss tonight, which is less time than that provided between the county board setting this public hearing and also its conduct of the public hearing. Section 359 of the county law specifically provides for adjournment of this hearing from day to day for this purpose or other purposes. Third, it's disconcerting to see that there's no Allegheny County resident-friendly provision at this public hearing for people who address this body by Zoom, although that capability is available. The copy of the legal notice I received indicated people needed to appear in person. The budget message publicly provided later said that individuals can submit written comments. I don't believe this is a convenient process for individuals with compromised immunity systems in other situations. They have a choice of coming into these chambers after being told they have to wear masks, have temperature checks, and social distance to find a board of legislators and county officials with no masks. No information was provided in regard to how people even should begin to submit written comment, which, as noted, is not a public convenience to begin with. Fourth, for those of you who may not be aware, the governor has signed into law a measure which provides that actions taken by a governing body, along with supporting documents, must be made available to the public at least 24 hours in advance of such meeting. Therefore, this board's consistency in introducing resolutions off the floor through a 2/3 vote no longer will be lawful. This takes effect next Thursday. In addition, all local government bodies, including all county entities, must make minutes of their meetings, approved or not, available online within 14 calendar days, with any actions involving an executive session within a week. This law was signed Monday, became effective immediately. The clerk of the board generally does a great job in this area already, but I believe there are some other county-related entities which do not, since I haven't seen their minutes or not in that time frame. I also would note that the nonpartisan New York Coalition for Open Government, which Allegheny Hope is an active participant, which initiated these law changes, also is pursuing legislation for an ongoing hybrid system of open meetings, which would include public comment provisions at all local government sessions, something that many already do along with other actions. This is brought to your attention because I communicated some time ago with the county administrator that I believe the county already is in violation of many provisions of state open government laws, and feel it should start to not only bring the county into compliance, but make county business more accessible and transparent even before any new legislation goes into effect. Now, on to the main budget subject. That's part, I believe, that goes into the budget, and then in the discussion in regard to budget. 3 or 4 years ago, before this pandemic, I know that most of you know that I'm not new here. I noted at least one public hearing on the budget that the county's unappropriated fund balance was the highest percentage I'd have ever seen, having gone to literally hundreds of governmental meetings over the years, and that it was equal to taxing county residents a year in advance, in essence. Today, it appears the number only has grown larger. Now, state law provides for a reasonable fund balance. Reasonable. It doesn't define what reasonable is, but it also provides for a significant contingency account, too. I would suggest that $30 million is totally unreasonable and irresponsible, except for the purpose of being able to chortle a small tax increase or decrease each year to county voters while the pot continues to grow, as has been discussed in the last week or two. School districts, in comparison by law, only are allowed 4% of appropriations, which for the county would equal $500,000, a far cry from $30 million. And I'm not advocating $500,000 because I think that's low. But the other day, the county treasurer reported that the county, even considering set-asides for cash flow needs, has 11 million or so, which it can play with, quote unquote, play with. Some of the discussion in the past 2 weeks after this exorbitant fund balance, along with the county having the third highest upstate sales tax and the second highest true value property tax in the state, was once again brought to light that the county should be looking at setting money aside for unknown economic development and other unknown projects. This was stated at the meeting the other day, or a couple meetings. I'd submit that based on all of this type of discussion, that we have a red herring approach to this situation. For those of you who are not familiar with what red herring means, it's basically a term that's often used to describe the position of attorneys, politicians, who many times include attorneys and others, to distract one from the real issue or issues when one doesn't have a case. I'd suggest that the argument being used in the entire context of the discussion heard to date is a red herring to the real issue of a lack of proper planning, which results in poor budgeting. I recognize what you said, Mr. Chairman, in regard to some planning, but I have a different approach and different comments in regard to budgeting. This isn't to say that the budget officers haven't done a good job in creating a budget, but the principles of a good budget start at the top with good planning as to what needs to be done and how to go about doing it. In other words, legislative policy decisions. Let's look at some of the pieces before the board. We have an extra $1 million already, having been included in the contingent fund, as I understand it, for economic development, bringing that total to $1.85 million, with no stated plan in place to even spend it for that purpose, as was discussed the other day. This already equals 1.5% of the budget for what I would refer to as maybe expenses. State Comptroller in the budget chapter of his accounting and reporting manual from the Division of Local Government and School Accountability, and I place heavy emphasis on the word accountability, says a contingency line items may be included in the budget by the governing board to provide funding for unexpected events. That's unexpected. However, I'd submit that unexpected events do not include those which are planned to be unexpected in some fashion. I've watched the board appropriate money to the contingent account when it should, in my opinion, have been part of the budget, but there was no plan, and so we stick it in the contingent account where we can move it at any time without really much of a notice in order to do what we might want to do that might pop into place. Second, the budget has made no consideration for the Federal American Rescue Plan, ARP funds, of which the county apparently has been sitting on some $4.5 million for some 6 months, with another $4.5 million to be received next year. This is the first time I can remember that the federal government hasn't required emergency appropriation to local governments to stimulate the economy by undertaking shovel-ready projects which are ready to go within 3 to 6 months after the money's received, or at least been notified of receipt availability. Getting shovels in the ground, jobs to the residents, and money in their pockets to spend and further stimulate the economy normally is the goal of many of these recovery programs. And this is not happening. We're sitting on the money again. I asked some, and based upon the discussion the other day, there really isn't any plan at this point, or it's not being revealed to the public at this point. Many communities, school districts, and so forth are holding public hearings and in regard to input in regard to what this type of money is going to be used for. I asked some time ago when these types of funds were first being discussed what the components were that had been submitted to the state as ideas, and was told there were many projects Now, a couple of years later, a long time gone by, there apparently were no plans developed by the county to use these or any other funds it might receive. Instead of stimulating the economy, the money apparently is sitting in a bank account, again drawing more money instead of being used for public good. Again, another lack of planning, in my opinion. A $1.2 trillion infrastructure package is also about to be signed by the president. What are the plans for it? Or is that going to sit in the bank instead of being used for public good? Another $1.75 trillion also may be in the offing. Is the county still going to be asleep at the switch, taxing its residents while accumulating millions more to spend on whatever might come through the door, regardless of whether it's the highest and best use of its money? And that's a major concern. What is the highest and best use of the monies that we appropriate and use? What is the highest and best use of federal money? I've been here before. I was here, I guess it was last month, in regard to this whole housing issue involving spending $100,000 on manufactured housing, when you could take the same amount of money if you got it from a different source and do a whole lot more housing for a whole lot more people in this county. That's the type of thing I'm talking about. For the past 40 years, I've been an advocate for zero-based budgeting, where one doesn't start to build a budget based on last year's expenditures, but rather at zero with a zero, telling how it was constructed and why. This involves real planning. As a news reporter, a city mayor, a municipal administrator, municipal management advisor, who I specialize in taking 10 to 15% out of each budget and increase the services at the same time, particularly in distressed communities, my experience has been that this works, not only in communities of 1,000 people or less, but in county governments 10 to 15 times the size of Allegheny. So it's very broad-based. In one government, it was 30 to 35% in reduction in current and future costs, which have been closer to 50 if one department hadn't been so politically entrenched and we weren't able to move it. Again, it relies on planning, identifying issues, solutions, and then finding funds to implement them, often working hand in hand with those issues at the same time. Another issue I've found over the years is that when governments are sitting on substantial surpluses and nowhere near that which Allegheny County has in its coffers, there is less incentive to find new ways of doing things and to do more with less for the benefit of more people and in more ways. Therefore, even though taxes may look like they're going down, people are being taxed more due to these inefficiencies and primarily a lack of planning again. And I've seen this over and over again in different kinds of municipalities. Tax rate remains stable forever, but they're basically, resting in place. Therefore, I would suggest that with all the surplus the county currently has, federal dollars already received and expected to flow to it, and opioid settlement and other monies which also haven't been budgeted, and some for a good reason not having been budgeted, that this board first determine how much really is needed for a contingent account based on real unexpected expenses, not some pie in the sky thing, not some maybe we will do. The other day it was said, well, we're going to put this money aside in case we need it. Well, contingency accounts aren't put aside just for pet projects that might come up from time to time. Second, that the county take nearly all the money out of the fund balance that isn't necessary for cash flow purposes, taking into consideration in particular the history of arrival of sales tax receipts, much of the real estate tax actually arriving in January or by early February, so it has a cushion there, and any other real blips in the system. In other words, determining when the money is needed, how much is needed, and that would help to determine the fund balance that's really needed. Third, that it reallocate all excess funds, taking into consideration school district constraints and special circumstances in regard to fund balances and contingent accounts, to property tax and or sales tax reductions. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, I also noted here a provision in the law which appears to allow local governments to opt out of charging full sales tax on clothing. In other words, the state has a provision now that if you buy clothing in New York State, first $100 is not sales taxed. There are a couple counties that do that, any other places. And if Allegheny County was doing that, I believe that there's a potential, and I think it does need to be studied, no question about that, but that, and how much it's going to cost you, and so on and so forth, but that would help to stimulate the economy, and would also have an offsetting benefit to restaurants and other types of businesses, other retailers, because people would come to Allegheny County because they weren't paying any sales tax up to $100 on clothing entirely. And so therefore it could be an economic stimulus, and it wouldn't be a full reduction in sales tax. But the practice of having a 0.5% extra, which basically in many cases 9% on a dollar sale, not 8.5%, I believe is regressive, and it also does not help to stimulate the economy among businesses and a retailer. And I said the other day, I was a retailer on a main street for over 30 years in central New York, and that's sort of noteworthy because only 7% of small businesses are in business after 10 years, and I outlasted 2 banks and a regional supermarket chain. And so I have some ideas in regard to retail also, probably not as much as some folks here, but at least some. I also was told at that time that the county already was locked into the higher sales tax rate by state legislation. And I would submit that any state legislature who would refuse to support special legislation to reduce this county's sales tax, if there was a way to do that, and a reasonable way and a logical way to do that, regardless of where they're from, would add to their political liability. I don't think that's an issue. That can be a shield, could be another red herring, but it is not a real issue in regard to reducing the sales tax rate for this county. Fourth, that the county go to zero-based budgeting and build budgets based on identified needs and a real plan to fund them from the bottom up whenever monies become available. In other words, instead of saying, well, something comes through the door, very much like the housing thing that I've already mentioned, the housing project, instead of, well, we'll grab it because it's available, we actually determine what we need and we go out and find the resources to make that happen, versus relying upon somebody else dictating, in essence, what the counties really needs to be doing. And fifth, as recommended by the Government Finance Officers Association, which would be the first item if county government had responded earlier in the year, they say establish a formal policy on the level of unrestricted fund balance that should be maintained in the general fund for GAAP, which is generally accepted accounting principles, and budgetary purposes. Not figure it out as you go along, but have a plan in place as to what you need, how it should be determined, what happens when you if your fund balance actually goes down below levels that you might want to do, and all of that. But it's based upon actual factors, actual thought out factors, and not upon, well, we'll take a few bucks off today and we'll add a few bucks tomorrow and see how it all flows, depending many times on the political environment. So again, the issue is planning, simple planning in budget practice. And with all due respects, I have, as I have attended these meetings, I have not seen that planning component to any major
Mr. Chairman?
extent go into this.
If I may, I apologize for interrupting.
Yeah.
Can you clarify the purpose of this public hearing for me, please? I thought it was to discuss the specifics of this budget, not budgeting philosophy. Thank you.
You have more, Mr. Jones?
No, in fact, I was just about to wrap it up. So I was just going to thank you and for this piece.
You were wandering afield, so we
Well-
appreciate your input and comments on our
Yeah.
policies and
Well,
how
I
we
think with all
operate.
due respect that it goes to the budget that's here today, because you can't get to point B without getting to starting at point A. And so without having good planning and good basics, it's very difficult to have a solid budget. And
Mr.
so-
Jones, if you could direct us to a specific part of this budget to which you are upset, we would be happy to look at it and discuss it with you.
I just gave it to you.
What budget line was that?
It wasn't a budget line, it was the budget and the way it was put together and what goes into it in regard to developing that budget. That is the important part.
That sounds like a conversation, excuse me, and if this is inappropriate, please, Mr. Chairman, stop me. This sounds like a conversation that would be best suited to be had outside of this forum. This forum is to talk about this 2022 tentative budget specifically, and any questions or comments you have about its contents. It's not about how the budget is created, the process with which the schedule is used to create the budget. None of those matters are up for discussion tonight, from my understanding. Now, again, I'm new here, but from my understanding, this is not the appropriate forum for what you've been discussing for the last 20 minutes.
I'm on your side. This is not about budget policy or budget philosophy. This is about, I don't have my microphone in because I wasn't intending to speak. I cannot let this go. This was to talk about tentative budget. If anybody had questions about any aspect of the budget, not the budget philosophy. We have a procedure in place which we have followed. I've been on the board 8 years. We have followed it every year. We've had the decreases in the tax rate for all of those 10 years. It started before my time. And we do not need to have someone just come and expound on their experiences with other budgets. We have a process. If you want to discuss the process, that's a different forum for a different time. It's not this public hearing on the 2022 Allegheny County budget.
Let's do this. Mr. Jones, it sounded like you were, you got your message across, that you came here to give us.
Yeah, I did,
And,
and I thank you for the opportunity. My last comment was I'd be glad to take any questions. I think I got a few comments in regard to it. And
Mr. Chairman, point of order.
Mr. Graves?
Mr. Jones made a couple requests at the beginning of his missive there. I just think about proceeding here and moving on. Should we consult with our county attorney? He's here in the room.
I think we can have a follow-up conversation to that, and Mr. Jones is on the record with his requests and his points, and I think we can take that into consideration, and thank you for coming.
Sure, I appreciate it, and as I say, I think my points were just reaffirmed by some of the board members, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
I just don't want to see us have to go back and tread this ground over again after that, his request. If it has no validity, I think we should move on.
I think we should move on, and we certainly have time to take a look at that. Thank you. So we'll go back to the clerk of the board. We got to the first item out of 18, I think.
Okay.
Madam Clerk?
And Mr. Jones, if you could please email me your official statement, we would appreciate it. On page 10, total education, $2,786,435. Are there any questions regarding total education? If you turn to page 14, total public safety, $12,743,245. Are there any questions regarding public safety? Page 18, total health, $5,315,255. Are there any questions regarding total health? Page 19, total bus transportation, $1,427,750. Are there any questions regarding bus transportation? Moving on, page 25. Total economic assistance and opportunity, $34,680,080. Are there any questions regarding economic assistance and opportunity? Mr. Jones?
I'm confused as to what pages you're talking about. I'm interested in the Office of Development. I don't know if you passed this by or you're just starting it.
I believe the Office of Development starts on page 21.
Correct, yeah. And you went by it and I think called it something else maybe, or it's included in something else?
It is included in with the Economic Assistance and Opportunity.
Okay. Well, I'd like to address the Office of Development. Best I can tell from the budget, there's about $500,000 in here for economic development. There's another $500,000 in here for planning, which would be $1 million. And I'm not able to follow, based on what I had, any revenues, offsetting revenues against those appropriations. But I would say that I'm used to looking at a budget for economic development and seeing that it's paid for. Paid for through administrative funds, through grants and other resources, and that there is no county outlay for this. And based upon what I've seen and based upon what I could find in the budget, that doesn't seem to be the case here. Done a lot of economic development over the years, and at no cost to the local government. And so I think this ought to be taken a look at if I'm on the right track, that it's costing more and getting without getting the revenue, and that there are ways to expand that. We'll go back to the housing again, of where the administrative funds for all of that is going over to Cattaraugus County. You get a small amount, I think it's $10,000 or $12,000 maybe, depending upon how much their overall grant is, for the bookkeeping and things here, or whatever you need to do. But as I say, I believe that needs to be taken a look at, because I believe that most of that money could be recouped if it was well structured in regard to how to go about it, both in planning and also in economic development. Thank you.
Page 27, Total Culture and Recreation, $293,267. Are there any questions regarding culture and recreation? If you turn to page 29, Total Home and Community Services, $2,739,914. Are there any questions regarding home and community services? Total undistributed, this is on page 30, $23,505,030. The grand total for our total general fund, which is also seen on page 30, is $95,377,646. If you turn to page 32, this is the total for the WIA grant fund, $1,057,475. Are there any questions regarding the WIA grant fund? On page 33 is the total risk retention fund, $250,000. Are there any questions regarding total risk retention fund? On page 34, you will see the total risk retention health fund at $9,383,000. Are there any questions regarding the total risk retention health fund? On page 37 is the total county road fund, $13,264,263. Are there any questions regarding our county road fund? On page 38, you'll see our total road machinery fund at $1,744,290. Are there any questions regarding road machinery fund? On page 43, you'll see our total capital projects fund, $2,190,000. Are there any questions regarding the Capital Projects Fund? On page 44 is our total self-insurance fund, $950,000. Are there any questions on the self-insurance fund? Also on page 44 is the total debt service fund, $2,379,500. Are there any questions on the debt service fund? Our total appropriations for the tentative 2022 budget is $126,596,174. And I believe that concludes our categories for tonight.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And Budget Officer, do you have anything that you want to add?
I don't, no. Thank you.
Thanks. And was there anyone else that wanted to address the board tonight before we close this public hearing?
But not about the budget.
Well, this is about,
I know, I just a real quick question. One,
you're going to have to come up to the microphone and,
just a real quick question, once we're all done.
at the end, you're not for the hearing.
No, not for the hearing. No, it's not. So, just, yeah.
Thank you. At this point, we'll conclude the public hearing for our 2022 tentative budget. And thank you for attending.